Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into Everyday Betting. Pretty good episode today, I guess tonight, rather. We got Matt Cooper on to join. He goes over the U.S. Open with us. And so that's pretty much going to be the entire episode. It's a major event that begins tomorrow. And so really want to go ahead and get this out there for everyone. It's a really good interview. And so we really won't keep you waiting much longer. Matt Cooper, he's written for Forbes, ESPN. He writes for Unibet currently. He's very good with both betting and golf. And so you combine the two. This makes for a pretty good preview for the U.S. Open. So last tournament, the Tour Championship, Matt suggested taking Rory McIlroy to win the first round, not the entire leaderboard, but to have shot the best first round, because with the Tour Championship, as you know, the winning margin becomes a factor. Dustin Johnson entered at -7. Rahm was -5 or something like that. And so it wasn't necessarily that Rory would lead after round one. It was that he would have the best score with round one. And he tied. And so Matt hit on that bet last week, and he was actually quite happy about it.
How are you doing? Yeah, very, very good. And good news after we last spoke, because listeners who took very keen interest in our last chat will have known that I was quite keen on Rory McIlroy to shoot the low first round in the Tour Championship. And the very good news was that he was inspired by the birth of his first child, and he did shoot 6 under par. Unfortunately, it was equalled. Abraham Ancer, the Mexican, drained a 26-foot putt on the final green to join Rory as joint first-round leader. But that was a nice little, I think, 16-1. So, yeah, so that was nice.
Oh, yeah, 16-1. Not bad at all. Very, very valuable there. And so if you took the advice of Matt Cooper, congratulations, because you cashed in. And so sorry about the camera moving around, whatever. So that was good. So he did very well. And so he loves coming on the show, and we appreciate him very much for coming on. And this is a big event. So I want to get his thoughts on the U.S. Open. Is Rory the bet after having a pretty good week 2 weeks ago, coming in now into a major event? What about other top golfers to watch? I asked Matt to just break down the top 5 favorites, maybe top 10, basically, the usual suspects, your Dustin Johnsons, your John Rahms, who he was very high on, along with Xander Schauffele. And so here's Matt breaking down the top class of golfers and the favorites entering the U.S. Open.
Well, a little bit of me has started the week quite keen on Rory's chances, based to a large degree upon the happy vibes that having a baby is going to lead to. But there's a couple of things that concern me a little bit. He has played his best major championship golf when the greens haven't been bone hard, and I'm a little bit concerned that that will be the case this week. It's also the case that he has sometimes thrived when he's had 4 par 5s to attack, because he's particularly good at those, and this is a par 70 this week. So ultimately, and the other good thing was he's, in more recent times, he's been a shorter price than he is this week. But ultimately, those doubts were sufficient for me to steer clear of Rory. I think Colin Morikawa, the guy proved at the PGA Championship, he's absolutely sensational at getting it from tee to green under the toughest circumstances. However, it was a bit of a shock that he won that one. It would be a bigger shock if he goes back to back. So at the short price he is, I'm a bit wary. John Rahm would be my most favoured of the top bunch. Dustin Johnson, he's been very difficult to stick him because his form's obviously quite sensational. 2 wins and a playoff loss in his last 3 starts. Albeit you might argue that his Tour Championship win comes with an asterisk because he had shots on the field to begin with, which helped him get over that line. But he has got this slightly dodgy reputation in majors, which is a little bit unfair, but he has blown a couple. But John Rahm, what impresses with him is Muirfield Village this year was set up to major specifications by Jack Nicklaus, and John Rahm was comfortably the best player in the field that week. And then probably during the FedEx Cup playoffs, John Rahm's victory at, I've forgotten where it was, Olympia Fields in Chicago, that was probably the most major leg of those three tournaments, and he was, again, the winner. So I think that's a pretty good form guy. And what's more, he knows it, that's how he feels set and ready for this week. So he would be my pick of the top. Well, actually, it depends if you include Xander Schauffele, because there is a rider. I think Xander Schauffele is of incredible interest, but I would perhaps suggest a slightly different bet than an outright bet. Schauffele, although I wouldn't knock anybody willing to back him outright. Do you want me to talk right away about why I quite fancy Schauffele in a slightly different way?
Yes.
Yeah, I tell you what it is. It is this. Now, where am I?
He's top 20.
If you look at Xander Schauffele when he plays elite events, it's quite extraordinary. So he's got 8 top 20 finishes from 12 major championship starts. He's got 3 in US Opens. He's got another 7 top 20s and 10 starts in the World Golf Championship stroke play tournaments. He's played the Players' Championship twice, finished second, so there's another top 20. He's 4 from 4 in the Tour Championship, again top 20s, and 2 from 3 in the Tournament Champions. So those are the most elite fields he ever plays. Now there has to be an asterisk against some of those. He's played the Tour Championship and the Tournament Champions, and to some extent the WGC events. They're not just elite field; they're also sort of smaller fields. So he's not competing against as many people, but he hits that top 20 incredibly regularly, and more regularly than his odds this week suggest at that. Now I'm actually going to get flummoxed here, Tom, because I can deal with outright prices in American numbers, but what we call 4 to 5 in our lexicon of odds. I'm not quite sure what that is.
That's about minus 125 for American odds.
I think it might be minus. That sounds about right. Yeah. Now that's a very different sort of price than I often speak on this show. But that's one of 2 prices that are quite narrow that I think look quite interesting this week. Xander Schauffele could easily win it, but an interesting way. But that's a really interesting way to get him on side. And this is going to be a really tough week. I think Winged Foot is quite famous for being tough. Anybody remembers 2006? It was chaotic. Ultimately won by Jeff Ogilvy. I mean, most folks in the 70s, they called it the massacre of Winged Foot. So it might well be that you'd be a bit scared of somebody sort of making their way through the sort of collateral damage to actually win it. So it might just be a little bit safer to sort of get somebody to get up the top of the leaderboard.
Yeah, and it can be that. It can be chaotic. Because it's golf. It's very difficult to predict in general. But you heard the names that Matt likes. He likes John Rahm. He likes Xander Schauffele. Kind of stay clear of Rory. He says it's tough to stay clear of Dustin Johnson because he has been in good form as of lately. But the top pick of the top names was John Rahm. Interestingly enough, Matt brought up his play at Merrifield Village, which, as he mentioned, Jack Nicklaus designed and put a lot of tests in the course that felt like a major, and John Rahm blew through that easily. So consider that as well from the top names, Rahm, and then Schauffele for 8. I think he said, was it 8 top 20 in the last 12 majors or U.S. Opens? That's phenomenal. So Xander Schauffele minus 125, take top 20. If you're wondering what Matt was saying, 4 to 5. That means 4 over 5 because that's fractional odds. There's 3 types of odd forms that you can use. American odds is plus minus. So you see plus 400, minus 400. Those are American odds. Fractional is probably what most of Europe uses, or decimal. Decimal is another form too. So I'm not going to get into it. That's a whole that we could spend an hour going over all that. So we won't get into that, but that's kind of what Matt was saying. Xander Schauffele, his top 20 odds are 4 to 5. In fractional odds, in American odds, they are minus 125. This event's going to be held in New York. New York has been the location of the U.S. Open a few times, and Matt and I are both very high on the location becoming a factor in most golf tournaments. This being on the East Coast, this is one of them. And I asked Matt, due to the location, is there someone specific he had in mind that people should watch? And Patrick Reed was at the top of the list, and this is what he had to say.
Yeah, I'm pretty keen on Patrick Reed whenever the tour gets to the States. About 12 months ago, one of the FedEx Cup play events went to Liberty National, which overlooked Manhattan, and the shadow of the Statue of Liberty stretched over the golf course. And immediately my sort of ears pricked up, and I thought Patrick Reed, because he's very proud American, I thought that would impact him very strongly, and indeed he went on to win that week. That's not going to be the same this week. But he's thrived in New York before in this tournament. He was fourth at Shinnecock Hills in 2018. So he's got into contention in 3 of his 6 appearances at his national championship. So he likes the conditions. He's a really, really good grinder. Very good around the greens that people give him a lot of credit for. The one thing I think is a bit of a minus this week is that I think it's the raucous crowds were walking down the fairways, possibly having a few words in his direction about his rules controversies last year. I think that would, in a sort of bizarre way, have impacted positively on him, because as we know, he tends to thrive when he can get a bit between his teeth and sort of metaphorically stick 2 fingers up to sort of conventional opinion. But if he gets into the mix, there's people in the media who might sort of prod and nettle him in that regard, and that might work out as a good thing. But I think he's got the right sort of game for this challenge, and I think he'll be well up for it.
Yeah, I think Patrick Reed, he kind of plays that villain role a little bit better. But as Matt was saying, there's not going to be people chirping in his ear, which could be added motivation. A good analogy for what Matt is talking about is Daniel Medvedev in tennis. This is a guy who plays better when the crowd boos him. It's like in wrestling terms, they are heels, they are villains, and they thrive on it. And Patrick Reed is without a doubt one who thrives on the negative pressure. But that won't be the case, as Matt was saying. But everything else about the location and the type of course that is going to be played fits Reed's bill. I asked him about Tommy Fleetwood because he seems to play very well during majors. And Tommy Fleetwood to finish as the top Englishman, I kind of like. So I asked Matt to touch on that a little bit.
Strokes against stats were very good last week. He's a bold chance this week. It's also quite interesting with him. He played in the final round of the British Open last year with Shane Lowry, and he didn't come out on top. And Tommy Fleetwood is possibly one of the nicest people in golf, and he was a little bit sore about not putting up a good show in that event. So I think he's been on a lot of people's sort of notebooks as to come out fighting at some point this year and have another good go at a major, because he wants to get it.
Yeah, and so for top Englishmen, worth considering there with Tommy Fleetwood, we had to ask about Tiger Woods. He is given odds to win this event at plus 4,000. And Matt, as he tells you, that Tiger hasn't really seen odds this low since he was an amateur. And he actually won people a lot of money when he was an amateur at plus 4,000 when he was winning majors. But that's not the case this year for obvious reasons. And so should you stay clear of Tiger, even though he won the Masters, should you stay clear of him going to New York, where he's won a couple times? He won the Bethpage Black course, which we'll get to in a little bit with Lucas Glover. But so, yeah, Tiger Woods, plus 4,000. Is he worth the take? Matt doesn't think so.
I think he's a very tricky one to get a grip on this week. I think you can actually get plus 5,000 in places, and they're 50. Getting lost now, 1,500 plus 1,500. And I got asked on Twitter whether that's the biggest prize Tiger's been at a major. Somebody replied and said they got him at an absolutely enormous price the first time he ever played the British Open, but that was in the sort of 20th century. So back when he was an amateur, so he hasn't been this sort of price for a very long time. But what happens is when you go and look at his results this year, you wins to open the year. But since then, his best finish in 5 stars is tied 37th in the PGA Championship. And most recently, he was tied 58th in the Northern Trust and tied 51st in the BMW Championship. That's not the sort of form that gives you a great deal of hope that he's going to spring from somewhere and do something special. I'd like to see it, but I'm not entirely convinced that I'm going to see it.
Yeah, that's a fair assessment as well. But for plus 4,000, if you are a Tiger fan, those are valuable odds to root for. They're cheap enough to take. Obviously, if you have a few bucks and you want to take Tiger, just because you like cheering for him and rooting for him, that's perfectly fine. Jason Day has seen a couple runner-up results at the U.S. Open. And so going back to the top Englishman market, I was wondering about Jason Day to finish as the top Australian in this event, and if that was a good bet. And just Jason Day overall in this event, is he a good take? Although Matt and I do like Jason, Matt is a little bit weary on the injuries that have seemingly plagued Jason Day as of lately, and this is what he had to say.
He's an interesting one because he played very, very well up to and including the PGA Championship. He had 4 top 10 finishes in a row. Wow. And then it's almost like he hit some sort of wall because he missed the cut in Boston at the Northern Trust and then was tied 64th at the BMW Championship. And basically, he would have missed the cut there had there sort of been one. It's interesting. Jeff Ogilvie, of course, was an Australian, and he's talked up the Australians this week and said, Jason Day, if he was in good form, has got the game to play well here because he's very good around the greens. He's just a straight rate. Very, very difficult to call because you never really know what state his back's in. There's lots of golfers who have the odd twinge here and there, but when he gets a bad back, it seems to be a very, very bad back. And to add to the curiosity of the mix and the difficulty of reading him, there's also a touch of sort of hypochondria about Jason Day. So sometimes you don't know whether he talks that he's in a bad situation. It's not quite as bad as he thinks it is in a strange sort of way. It actually helps him to go on and on about how poorly he feels. On the other hand, you just think he might be some sort of weird confusion that's not helping him. Ultimately, I think I'd look elsewhere.
Okay, so look elsewhere for Jason Day, but in terms of the top Australian market, consider. But again, you don't know what back you're getting with Jason Day, and it rains, it pours with that injury, according to Matt. And as his form has shown you, that is true. The wall that he has hit is just kind of sudden, but it's injuries with Jason Day. So if you get a healthy Jason Day who can overcome some stuff, looks good, but otherwise you want to stay clear. I brought up Lucas Glover because he's, to me, a pretty good long shot bet to win. He has won the U.S. Open before. He's won in New York as well. Mackenzie Hughes, though, is on Matt's radar, and Mackenzie Hughes has odds to win at plus 10,000. That is phenomenal. But whenever a golfer that you like as a long shot bet has odds that low to win, as Matt says, looking into the top 10 or top 20 market also gives you good value. Mackenzie Hughes is plus 450 on 888 Sport to make the top 20. Matt mentions he's plus 500 in some other places. Those are great numbers for Mackenzie Hughes if Matt is talking about him being a long shot bet, and he explains why. But first, kind of wanted to ask about Lucas Glover and if he presented a good long shot bet to win the U.S. Open.
The incredible thing about Lucas Glover is that the last, he's always been good tee to green, but the last sort of 2 years, he's just been absolutely fantastic at sort of plowing through, getting himself top 20s, top 25 finishes through sort of 2019. It was just extraordinary how many he was picking up. That's sort of dropped away in recent times. So when he made the Safeway Open cut and ultimately only finished tied 65th, that was the first time in 5 starts that he actually made the cut, which is particularly sort of hopeful. And the biggest problem with him is his putting distance is sort of 4 feet to 8 feet. And curiously, scrambling is often seen as only a way of grading the first shot that we're talking about when we say scrambling, which is the chip onto the green or the putt just off the fringe. But it's also actually grading your capacity to hold short, tricky par putts. And I think that's actually why Tiger Woods was always pitched very highly in the scrambling stat, because at his height, there were fewer golfers you would want to be trying to hold 5-foot putts to par. He was just absolutely brilliant at it. Lucas Glover is not a man I would be wanting to sort of hold the wand when he's got a nasty 5, 6, 7-foot putt for par.
Yeah.
So he put me off. However, I do have a big price outside of me, and that is Canada's Mackenzie Hughes, who whilst you find out his up-to-date price, I'll just sort of through why I quite like him.
He is plus 10,000.
Yeah, a little nibble at something ridiculous happening, because we haven't had a ridiculous winner of a men's major championship for a heck of a long time. Probably Keegan Bradley winning the PGA Championship was the last sort of outrageous one. I know we've had people like Danny Willett and Shane Lowry winning at very tasty prices, but a really extraordinary winner we've had for a long time. And a little bit of me thinks is that it's about due, and perhaps it's the sort of thing that 2020 can throw up. It's also perhaps it will fit in with what's happened on the LPGA, where Kafir pop off, and last week Miriam Lee just won from remarkable. But Miriam Lee was blimey, this is going to test. She was 750 to 1 in British odds. That's so massive. It's testing my capacity to transfer into American odds. What's that, Tom?
That would be plus 750,000, I do believe, which is insane.
Utterly gobsmacking, and not least because she actually is in the world's top 100, but basically her form's just been abysmal for quite a long time. But I don't know if anybody watched it, but she chipped in 3 times in the final round, then won in extra holes. Absolutely mind-boggling victory. But back to Mackenzie Hughes. What I like about him is he played very well at Muirfield, which I've already said was a real tricky sort of test with hard greens, thick rough, very similar to this week. He's also played very well through the FedEx Cup playoffs, improving every week, so he's getting into nice form there. He was tied to the Travellers, which was a pretty good effort. In 2019, he only lost in a playoff to Graham McDowell in an event. He was second at PGA National this year, which is a major standard course, and it's often set up quite tough. So I like the fact that he's been playing tough golf courses very well. He's a huge price, and you can, for a top 20, you're looking at sort of plus 500.
Yep, right around there.
Even if you went top 10, you get to go top 10, you get a much juicier price. But that's next to a really juicy outright price. And also bear in mind, if you can get each way, a lot of bookies are offering each way with sort of enormous numbers of places, which is well worth looking at.
Yeah, so going each way possibly there are some books that are going 8 to 11, I believe Matt said at one point, and so each way is always a good bet to make as well. So let's recap pretty much what we've learned. We learned that Matt hit a bet last time he was on the show with Rory McIlroy, but not this week. Stay away from Rory. Top golfer that he likes is John Rahm. He also likes Xander Schauffele and Patrick Reed. From the Englishman, Tyrrell Hatton he likes. I know I didn't play that audio clip, but he did mention Tyrrell Hatton to me at one point. And Tommy Fleetwood would be an entertaining idea and a fun person to, quite frankly, root for. Tiger, probably want to stay away from Jason Day, probably want to stay away from Lucas Glover in terms of a long shot bet and past winners. probably want to stay away from, but a good long shot bet to consider is Mackenzie Hughes. And again, when you have golfers that are given odds at plus 10,000 to win an event, feel free to take them. But for a realistic chance of winning at great value, plus 450, plus 500 for Mackenzie Hughes to finish within the top 20 is one of Matt's good bets as well. So that's going to do it for us. I've got good news in terms of the Emmys coming up on, what day are they coming up on? They're coming up on Sunday. So we're going to have a betting preview for that. Going to have our buddy Nick Puro on, who does Wrestling with the Odds with me. He works on various television shows on set. He some shows, Vampire Diaries. I've never seen it, but I'm sure a lot of people have heard of that. And then there's some sports show on USA Network that deals with doctors and I think concussions. I forget what it's called, but Necessary Roughness, I think is what it's called. Unnecessary Roughness, I'm not sure, but shows you how good of a friend I am. I'm too busy. That's why I got 5 freaking TVs here. But thank you all for watching. Be sure to follow the Everyday Fan, sports fan, doing great things, covering WNBA, pop culture. Again, we have the Emmys coming up. We will be previewing that on Friday. Not sure what we're going to preview Thursday. I thought we were going to do college football with Lamar Fields. We might have to re-record due to the fact that the audio just did not sound that great. So we'll see what happens, but we'll play it by ear. Friday, we're definitely going to have Emmys, though, so be sure to tune into that. And follow Everyday Fans on Twitter, and check out the work online, wherever else you can follow them. Facebook, too. Now they're on Facebook. So, yeah, show some support for them. Do a lot of good stuff there. So thank you all for watching, tuning in. Go out and make some money, make some good bets. And until next time, we'll see you.